Okay, I think we should get going. I'm sure a few more people will come in as we go along. I just want to say welcome. I think quite a number of you are almost no one I think is a newbie, but maybe there's one or two of you coming in for the first time, but welcome or welcome back. I just wanted to say a few things about On-Head Arts about Art.Earth before we begin. Just to say that some of you were involved in the high water event that we did at the end of March. For those of you who weren't, it was a 13.5-hour Zoom call celebrating the equinoctial high tide. Anyway, all I want to say about that is that the video of that event is now almost complete and on the website. So if you go to our main website, look at projects, find high water, you'll find the videos there if you want to have a look. It's just an amazing array of people from all over the world telling stories about their high tide or swimming or being out in the water or whatever it might be. So it's definitely worth checking out. And also just wanted to mention 2 events that are coming up, not quite immediately, but next. We have another First Friday, obviously, in June. And we have 2 speakers for that already. So if there's anybody out there who would like to come in for June, you'd be welcome. Just get in touch. And then we have 2 events coming up over the summer. One is a part of our borrowed time sequence, which Dr. Rachel Clark, whose name some of you may have seen, particularly if you remember a few years back, there was the big strike by the junior doctors, and she was one of the most outspoken members of that community. But she's also a writer, gorgeous writer, who's written about end-of-life care. She's written about living with COVID as a doctor in the NHS. The writing is extraordinary, and we invited her to keynote, to be a keynote for Borrowed Time way ahead of the event. So she's going to keynote on June 23rd. And if you are a member, that's free. Otherwise, I think it's a £5. Again, you'll find it on the website. And then another writer is going to join us for First Friday in July, which is Sophie Pierce, who's written a book called The Green Hill. So again, you can have a look at that. And that's part of our Borrowed Time theme as well. But I'll shut up now. And I'm going to introduce Rob and Harriet, old friends from way up north, who've been very busy doing extraordinary work up there. And they're going to tell us about something that they're doing at the moment.
Hi everyone. Thank you, Richard, for that introduction. It's really nice to be here. We're not that far north because we're not in Scotland, but we're here in Cumbria.
That counts. When you're down here, that counts.
I suppose, yeah, it is definitely far north.
So yeah, Rob and I work together through our practice, which we call Somewhere Nowhere, which takes its name from a poem written by Anne Stevenson. And we're going to just share a short presentation today with a little bit of a very, very brief overview of a bit of our work, what we got up to during COVID, and what we've just developed, which we're excited about. So bear with us. I'm going to try and share the screen. Let's see if this works. There we go. We're hoping that you can see the screen.
We can see it, yeah.
Great, okay, brilliant. So a lot of our work takes walking as a really fundamental part of that. So we're just going to start off with a poem that I wrote off the back of a long 13-day walk. Resilience. Oh, we need to hang on. Oh, yeah, resilience. This small skin-held society, my body, feels its way over grass and stone, leans into wind, an ecology of muscles, sinews, joints, eyes, feet. Knees find consciousness. Pain rises, then eases like a river after rain. Day by day, body takes over mind, shows what it knows, learns as it goes. When weariness sets in, the mind compels those final, necessary movements to set up home, to make food, to eat. Then lying flat, lets go, muscle by muscle, tendon and nerve, relaxes into healing. Over time, like land weathered, the body finds its strongest form, to be upright and certain in the face of a storm. So we take a lot of inspiration from walking in the landscape, and Rob does all the pictures and I put some words together.
Yeah, Harriet just tends to look good in the landscape in different weather conditions, as you can see. But as well as us engaging with the landscape ourselves personally, we also like talking to folk. We're really curious about what goes on out there from experts, including farmers, including conservationists and other artists who are deeply entwined with the landscape, their place. So we do a lot of recorded conversations, and that feeds into our work and into our knowledge.
And as well as producing poetry and photographs and sharing it through exhibitions and books, we've started doing installations in the landscape, very kind of light touch that doesn't stick around, and we can take it away again. And we thought this was nice, given that we're here, art.earth. This is something we did in Cumbria. Recently, we did a project called Sense of Here. This was back in 2019. And as part of that, we took this idea of installation of words in the landscape. Around Cumbria, we followed the formation of a clock and divided the landscape into 12 parts. And each month, we walked and camped in each of the 12 sections and put a canvas up as we went around, changing the words every time.
Yeah, so the canvas was the same. It's just a case of Velcro letters coming off and then going back on again and being repositioned in another space as part of the clock face that you can see here now. So the radial lines of the clock face, which come out of a tree, it's a tree near Grasmere on a scree slope, and that's how we started as a central point. The blue dotted line is a walk that we did over 13 days to link up the blue squares, which is where the canvases were placed. And then those campsites, we camped each month on a specific line, degree line from that tree. So it was a kind of a way of collecting data of the heart, as we call it.
Yeah, as we're using the data of the compass to find out where to put our tent. But the walking is always for us data of the heart. We've linked up with a fellowship program where people in lots of different disciplines are looking at issues of environmental change, and that inspired this Sense of Here project and really embracing complexity of landscape. So while we were also walking and camping and putting installations in each of the 12 sections of the land, we were looking at 12 issues. We carried out more than 50 interviews of experts by experience, academic experts, and we also carried out an online survey. We got more than 250 responses to find out how people felt about their place. So that took us to the end of 2019. You know, we're really interested in not these separate issues, but where everything overlaps and this kind of middle ground. So we built everything up. We were going to be doing loads of public events in 2020, and then COVID hit.
Yeah, that was a bit of a downer, as we can all attest to. So that stymied our plans for a lot of engagement we had planned for last year. We did get an exhibition off the ground. We showed at Grisdale Forest, the galleries there, the beautiful galleries there. So we placed that in the autumn, which was well received, but it was only there for a brief time before another lockdown.
Yeah, but we did do a film, didn't we? So
we did a film,
that's
yes.
Still available to watch.
Yeah. And this is something that we actually managed to do during lockdown. You know, we're really in tune with our local place, but like a lot of folk, our local patch shrunk enormously, especially during the first lockdown. We were talking at the start of the conversation about the nice weather last year, and we were asked by a farmer to go and check his fields to find out about curlews that he thought might be nesting on his land, because he was going to try and protect them. So that became our our bone to sort of chew over a few months, watching these curlews on our local patch, and the ups and downs, the roller coaster ride of watching this iconic breeding
Yeah,
bird.
so we did find a nest with 4 eggs in it, and unfortunately the eggs were predated. This picture here is of an adult bird that successfully nested and successfully reared chicks that actually fledged after their 5 years, 5 weeks as eggs, then 5 weeks as birds that can't fly. They made it. And we've linked up with a local community of curlew watchers, and in fact, nationwide, our community has spread through curlews, which has been wonderful. And after a bit of kind of just being in the garden and watching curlews, we began to get back to a bit of work. And in COVID times, we've been out and about. It's lucky that our work is outside. So we keep meeting people outside. We're down in the Wye Valley, having a completely different type of festival experience, interviewing people about their relationship with the river. And we've produced poetry and a book off the back of that. We also spent some time in the Ennerdale Valley, which is near us. And again, you know, Ennerdale, some people know it as Wild Ennerdale. For the last 20 years, there's been a project going there to try and allow nature to have more of an upper hand, if you like, in how the landscape changes. So we worked on that, and we've done workshops online. But, you know, it's all about community, isn't it? So we're really trying to build our community through art and environmental networks. And that brings us to Pando. So it's just a metaphor for community. This, if you don't know about Pando in Utah, it's a tree that's between 10 and 11,000 years old, has 40,000 stems.
46,000 stems at the last count, apparently, and it covers an area of 106 acres. So this, what you're looking at is one singular organism. It's a tree, it's an aspen, it sort of reproduces by clonal. So they've all got the same DNA. So over the last sort of 14,000 years, I believe, they've just been popping up and reproducing. We were working invited to go out and work in America back in 2019 in September, and we thought we can't go all the way over there without going to Utah, without going to see Pando. So 8 months ahead of time, we set up an interview with the ranger there, the chief ranger, a guy called Nick Musto, and spent a day there just wandering around this beautiful forest. And we've kept in touch. You know, we had a phone call with him and another artist over in America last week, talking about what they're going to be doing, using creatives to sort of show what Pando is all about, the beauty of it. It's struggling for a few reasons, which they're trying to identify, but it's about that community and being able to do things online now across the world, which perhaps would have been harder a year ago. So if one bright light has come out of the pandemic, it's the fact that we can do things quite adroitly, quite easily across the world and talk to each other. Yeah,
and connect more. So we're increasingly interested in how art can be used as actively to action, activism, gentle activism, protest. And we're just sharing an image here from a project we did called Archive of Lost Woods with the Woodland Trust in a woodland that is, perhaps those trees are no longer there. It's on the route of HS2. At the time, it wasn't actually definitely going to be cut down, but it has. So really sorry to say that, but it's part of our work of trying to get more and more people involved in art as a way to speak up, which kind of brings us to what we wanted to share. And also we really want to thank Richard for a lot of really formative conversations and discussions about this. We've set up the Place Collective at the Centre for National Parks and Protected Areas, which sits in the University of Cumbria here on our doorstep. And we're bringing together a community of artists who are kind of really critically engaged in issues of environment and want to collaborate with people in other disciplines and find this middle ground and use art as a research tool and a way to ask questions, to activate, to provoke, and to kind of shift the dynamics of things, really.
Yeah, and also to amaze. You know, we all know on this screen, I think, the power that art has to move the heart, as well as speak to the mind. So we had our first members meeting last night. There's 24, 25 of us so far, and we're just starting going. You know, we're just at the start of the whole project, the whole idea, and we're just really curious to find out where it will go. But it's on the I suppose on the theme of community, we really believe that, you know, art individually is great, but when you sort of mobilize together as a unit, it helps each other, and it helps move the conversations forward or in different directions, and looks at life through the environment through a different lens.
And welcomes the other than human elements of life into the community as well, because we don't want to be exclusive and separated. We are all coexisting and working together. So that's the Place Collective, and we'd love it. You can go look at the website and let us know what you think. And that's it. And I think we might have a few minutes for questions.
Yeah, if you want to come on.
So I've got to try and press the button. I've done it. It worked.
I think we have one actually from Jane in the chat. So I'm going to start off with that one. And she says, do you know of the arborealists?
Yes.
Now we, of course.
And
in particular, she's asking about their work in Lady Park Wood. And I realized that I have mispronounced their name because they call themselves the arborealists.
The arborealists. Yes. So yes is the short answer, Jane. The longer answer is we've met a few of them. We were down at the Wye Valley Festival when the arborealists were launching their exhibition a few years ago. We've been to Lady Park Wood. We've spoken to George Peterkin, Richard Bavin, who's one of the artists. So for people who don't know, Lady Park Wood has been fenced off for roughly 70 years and is being observed to see what happens when it is not managed. A beautiful wood, an inspiring story. And the fact that it's being watched without any attachment to a particular outcome. It's not as if it's trying to find proof for an inquiry question. It's just being observed, and I love that.
Yeah, we had a great conversation with Richard when we were down there. He was one of the people we met because we particularly wanted to meet him. We've been online and sort of met a few times, and he's now one of the Place Collective artists as well. We brought him into the fold. So we'd be interested to see his perspective on trees and place and relationships. It's all about relationships, I think. So yeah, no, he's a great guy, a really nice, gentle soul as well. We like his energy.
And in answer to your question, Fiona, Lady Park Wood is in the Wye Valley.
So it's just below Simmons Yat. So if you know where Simmons Yat is, it's on the Never Eat Shredded Wheat, the west side of Simmons Yat.
By
Biblin's Bridge, I think it's called.
Yeah. I'm very familiar with that area. But I didn't know about
I'd just like to add that, oh, sorry to interrupt, finish please.
Please do, okay.
Just to say I'm an arborealist too, and I know Richard very well. And I did work on the Lady Park Wood project and publication with Fiona. And it was just so exciting because it's the first time I'd engaged in anything like that. So I'm just glad you're all involved together.
Yeah, it's a wonderful group, wonderful project.
And in fact, I'm just going to do a little plug for the Evolving Forest book, because it not only has an article by Rob Harriet, it has an article by the Arborealists about the Lady Park Wood project. So you have to buy one of those.
That's great. Any other questions? That sounded really abrupt. Come on.
I have a question then.
Go on, Richard.
By the way, I can't see everybody on the screen. So if you have a question, you can click on the little reactions button, which is in the bottom of your screen, and say raise hand, and that will automatically bring you into focus. But I was going to ask you about a phrase that you came up with, and you always come up with these wonderful phrases that I then steal, which is about data of the heart. And I wondered if you just talk for that just for a moment, because we then should.
Yeah, I think data is used normally through academic circles and through modelling and science circles as being an object of information that you can use. And we think that what is sometimes left out of the equation is what we feel emotionally, that has just as important as the kind of cerebral data that might be useful in moving a conversation forward. So what you feel when you're outside, what you perceive when you're actually out in the landscape, you know, how the weather feels, all those little things that your body is attuned to taking in, I think should play a role in talking about place, because that in a way, by being out there, de-abstractifies the landscape. It takes it from this model place that you might be looking at as a scientist, as an academic, and it brings it into the real world equation. So us being out there in the rain and the wind and the snow, we do it for fun. You know, we love it. You know, we've got to say that, but it does bring something more into the conversation, I think.
Yeah, definitely. We're great believers that, well, I personally am, that even when you think you're using your head, you're probably using your heart to drive your action.
There are questions coming into the chat, but if we have got time, we'll go back to them later. If you guys can put your email in the chat, that people perhaps can contact you directly, but I think we need to move on.
Okay,
thank you very much. Great to see you again, and thank you. And Amanda Wallwork, we're going to come to you.
Hey.
There we are. Great. And you're immediately showing the screen.
Just trying to get it on the right thing.
There we go.
Okay. Is that?
Yeah, we're all good. We're all good.
Okay. Right. Okay, well, for many years, my work's been mostly concerned with archaeology. This is paintings mostly, but looking at things that you can't see on the ground, but what you can see from above, sort of shaped sort of marks in the landscape that give the evidence of past lives, but you can't necessarily see what's on the ground. And that's sort of what I was working with for some time, because I'm really interested in how landscape has determined our lives and how we determine landscape, and how that's changed over time with very early peoples very much responding to what's there, in contrast to today where we can just sort of you know, where we have the ability to completely change the landscape and also the landscape to meet our own requirements, intentionally or indirectly, with consequences. But through a lot of walking, really, which is very much part of my practice, became really interested in why these sort of ancient sites were where they were, and realizing that how much that the landscape really had that impact on that, and that, you know, that kind of situation of where we respond to the landscape. And through that became much more sort of interested in just a couple of other things. So apart from paintings, I'll be using sort of graphics. So this chart of invisibility maps all the round barrows, the Bronze Age barrows in the South Dorset Ridgeway area that were there once, that they know of, but no, most of them have disappeared. So this maps really what level you can see them at still. But this chart of invisibility was sort of using data that I got from the archaeological department of the local council, but put it into a visual form. And it was really kind of interesting to see how having no other information, how the actual ridgeway, if you like, the high points of ground can be seen by the mapping of where the places of where the barrows are in this particular sort of map. And I also produced a sort of light work where you pressed a button and you lit up all the ones that were there once. There were thousands and thousands of these Bronze Age burial mounds, and changed to what you could see, and you could flick the switch and it changed to what you could see today compared with what there once were. And I did that work particularly to sort of focus on what was there once and what past lives but you can't see today. So that was kind of the work that I was doing. But this realization that geology, through the archaeology, I realized that geology and topography had a huge impact on where things are. Hence that, you know, barrows are usually on the high ground, for example. So, and I had this opportunity to work with a project in the Mendips in quarries. And it's not an area I'm familiar with, so it was a new sort of departure for me to go to this particular area. And the thing it's an area that's pockmarked with lots and lots of quarries. So the first thing I did was look at to produce a map of all the quarries, but taking away all the other information. So you're left with just the quarries, and they represent opportunities where you can see the geology, because inside a quarry you're taking that material away and you're creating a sort of portal into deep time. So and geology is kind of really, the importance of geology became increasingly sort of interesting in the sense of, because the rocks below the ground determine the landscape. They determine the soil, which determines the plants, which determines the wildlife, and then how we use that land. So this sort of project was really kind of looking deeper at those rocks, and this was produced as a kind of large sort of one of those "you are here" maps in a quarry, and it confused a lot of geologists because I kind of left it where I had no information other than actually the map of the quarries and the age of the rocks that you could see if you were in those places, and that was just sort of explain that. But also, and this is where it got really interesting, I worked with, one of the things I really like to do is working with scientists wherever I can, and I worked with the British Geological Survey on this. So I sent them samples of the 4 main rocks of this area, and they to the Department of the, and I can never remember how to pronounce it, petrography, yeah, so which is basically the details of focusing on the detailed descriptions of rocks. And they did these microscopic scans using different processes, which revealed so much information that was really fascinating. But the bit that really got me interested was when the guy I was working with started going into huge detail, from what he could read from these images. He could read exactly what that rock was formed from, how it had been, what it had been through in its life to form what it was. And he was just like going off on a complete sort of detailed description, and he could just read that from these images. And that was really struck me, that how rocks really are data stores, and they store the information that tells us about the climate, the landscape, the creatures, and the environment of millions and years ago. So this is kind of fascinating. So I didn't know what to do with these scans. They were too beautiful. There's no point in painting them. They're beautiful as they are. So I turned them into Fraser magnets as a way of making something that you couldn't see into something that is something that people were very, very familiar with. So the 4 rocks you can see along the top are the different types, going from sort of andesite through to a Dalting stone. It's a limestone. And these Fraser magnets, and I also did a painting which represented the color, a kind of exaggerated color of each rock, and in their timeline. So the younger rocks at the top, the older rocks at the bottom. And so this magnet display kind of reflected those layers of time as well. So that was kind of like an interesting thing for me to do with that. But I don't live in that area. I live on the Jurassic coast in Dorset, near Bridport. And it was kind of going out on a boat trip when I saw the coast from the sea and realized that how coastlines, the cliffs at coastlines, are another place apart from quarries where you can see deep time, where you can see those layers of rock that are beneath our feet. And the Jurassic coast is particularly, is a World Heritage Site, and that's because the Earth processes, the rocks in their sort of stratigraphic sort of timeline have been tilted on the side. And if you walk from one end of the Jurassic coast to the other, you are walking through time literally, because they've been tilted horizontally when they would have been vertically. So you might walk from the East Devon end, where the rocks, the Triassic rocks, which are red, through the Jurassic, which is where I am, and through right through to the Cretaceous period of East Dorset with the white chalk. And it was the colours of these that was really kind of fascinating to explore. Along with geological mapping processes, and the colours that they, geological maps they had to come up with a color system to actually sort of denote the different colors, different rocks. And when they started, there was only a few colors, but as they kind of grew, they realized they needed a whole system. And so, and this is fascinating in its own right. So this work is a stratigraphic column for the Jurassic coast. It's called 185 million years, and it goes from the red rocks, the Triassic period at the bottom, through to the white rocks at the top of the Cretaceous period. And so it kind of represented that period of time, and how color, if you like color, taking a color symbolizes time, because each rock encapsulates what was happening over a period of time, and everything, all the landscapes, everything that happened in that period of time is all encapsulated in that rock layer over time. So these are the rocks that are near me, these fantastic sort of glowing colors of these cliffs on one side of where I live, of the estuary there, and so those are sandstones, and on the other side are all these grey slumping clays, completely contrasting, and they behave in different ways as well, in terms of the, clays that slip and slide and the rocks that fall. And when the two are on top of each other, you kind of create, that's what you get, where you get sort of landslides and such. And that sort of led to sort of series of work where I'm really doing basically portraits, geological portraits representing the layers and the colors of these particular points in time and points in place. And doing them sort of larger. Normally my work is relatively small, just because of the space to do it in, and because I use a technique of painting on plaster, it's quite heavy, and you can't possibly do a large canvas, as it were. So the process of doing sort of separate layers of blocks, so each one is sort of manageable, also works with the whole idea of layering of time of rocks. So this, interestingly, I was given a commission by the Dorset AOMB for a series of walks that they were producing. And they wanted that to sort of somehow to sort of a navigational thing for the walks, but with a difference. So I proposed to do these maps that showed the geology. So as you were walking, you were aware of what was under your feet, the different rocks, and how, as you were looking at that surface landscape, what was there and how the two related. So the colors relate to the different geologies, and on the maps I was able to include things like some of the field names, because field names often reflect what the rock is underneath, or the conditions of the field. I've also put sort of prehistoric sort of sites, as it were, because they indicated different kinds of patterns of behavior, old trackways, and also notes about any sort of particular wildlife or whatever that you might find there. So that commission was a fantastic way of taking some of the information that I've been kind of feeling as well as gathering and putting it into a very practical form.
You're a 5-minute warning.
Yeah, okay, I'll whiz on. I'm nearly finished anyway. So this is the kind of thing I'm on my daily walks near where I live. This is what I encounter, a constantly changing landscape, and I'm collecting all my samples all the time. And these now, since sort of thinking about it, these are not just rocks. Each one of these is a piece of data that actually records sort of the situation millions of years ago. And so in my studio at the moment, I'm working on lots of different works related to that, different stratigraphic columns relating to where I am now, and other works related to the geologies of the area. Right up from where I live, at the other end, which is one end of Chesil Beach, at the very other end is Portland, which is where I work with B-side as a curator. But Portland is very different geology. It's the limestone, they're very different colors, and that sort of, so I'm working on the two extreme ends of the Jurassic coast at the moment with these works, which are painting based but also map based as well. And this is just a recent work that just celebrates the glorious glowing colors of the sandstone on the cliffs near me, and this one layering of Portland, which is limestone on a Kimmeridge clay. So it's got, Portland has feet of clay, which I find quite fascinating. And very recent work, which is just looking at Portland itself and its agricultural past, because it's obviously a quarrying, it's known for its quarrying now. And the map on the left, the little green area is the only bit of Portland left that has not been affected by quarrying. All the pale creamy colour has all been quarried or affected by quarrying. The grey is just there, whereas residential development. And the work on the right is looking at old fields, lost fields that no longer exist because they've been quarried away. They now probably exist somewhere as some part of some fine building in London or something. So that's me.
Great, thank you, Amanda. I do, but there's been things coming in on the chat which you can look at later. But
okay.
Mary, there's a question from you. Do you want to come in and ask it? If Mary is still there.
Amanda, I'm really interested in your work. I actually found your work when I was doing some research for a fracking project in the US some time ago. I'm here in England now, but I spend a lot of time in the east coast of the US, which has a lot of damage done by fracking, as you may guess. Anyway, good to meet you. My question on your lovely column, you know, your multiple column things, is does the height of each piece connote actual depth? So they're really saying this is a thick bit, that's a thinner bit. I mean, that's lovely. They vary.
They more or less. It's, I mean, you can't be accurate.
Yeah, that's all.
As to where you are, obviously, but yes. More or less on those ones, that work, yes, that does sort of more or less represent the depth of that particular period of time or rock, if you like, in that area. Yeah.
Thank you. And the colours are magical. Just, I'm from Dorset originally, so thank you.
Anybody else? No question. Yeah, yeah, Robin Harriet. Oh, Harriet was waving.
Beautiful work, Amanda. Thank you. This is probably a really dull, stupid question, but because I can't tell because of the screen, and particularly that last piece, is that made from stone or is it like a 3D painting that you've done?
The Portland Fields one. Yeah, it's a painting. It's painted on plaster in the same way as the other work. It's just, but it's more of a drawing in a way, because I do a lot of drawing, and the process of drawing is as much so the drawing and rubbing out and drawing again to represent sort of walking boundaries, where you're kind of, you know, marks on the earth really. So it's a process as much as a final result in the lots of rubbing out and redrawing as part of that. And I often imagine I'm walking when I'm doing these, not necessarily that one, but other ones where, because I can't always be out there, a lot of time the process is a way of being out there and going over maps and things and just sort of keep drawing those sort of lines and then, or painting layers and then coming back to them again and building up those layers of time as well.
Lovely. Yeah, it had a feel of something really that has time in it. So that's lovely.
Love the maps as well, by the way. They're beautiful, and it's a nice way of bringing geology and just general walking together quite easily.
Thank you. Yeah.
There's a comment from Manu, just to remind everybody about Stephen Harding's Deep Time Walk app, which is also something that you might want to tap into. So that's if you go to, certainly if you Google Stephen Harding, it's in the chat. Look for the Deep Time Walk. You might find something there of interest. But I want to make sure that Carol doesn't get robbed of time, so I'm going to move on. Thank you very much, Amanda. That was really wonderful and engaging. And I'd love to talk more about the coast and about the falls, but there isn't time. So I'm going to move now to Carol.
Hi. Okay, so I need to share my screen. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, great. So I just need to collapse this window down. So this is an umbellifer, and that's a Latin word, and it's a stumbling block that prevents many people from becoming engaged with plants, including myself at the time, is definition is actually a flower cluster, which stalks of nearly equal length spring from a common center. And it's a good place to start because I've been long obsessed with this shape. It's called an umbel, this form, and it's where the word umbrella comes from. And to me, it symbolizes reaching out and connection. And that's what I try to do, to connect people with plants. I've been photographing, growing and studying plants for well, over 30 years, really. They've shaped my life and I've shaped theirs. I think we've learned to co-evolve together. This is another umbel, by the way, nearly missed that one. So I want to talk a little bit about how I arrived where I am now, because I've been a commercial photographer in my career for a very long time, and photographing flowers and what I call nature as ingredients. And in this commercial practice, the plants are like my models. And the practice is actually called still life photography, which I have some issues with when I sort of enter things into competitions, etc. And so this is, to me, seems now like extreme objectification, and the pink is just very loud. And the plants, the flowers are plucked from their plant, and they're unable to set seed, and their lives are ended prematurely for human pleasure, really. In fact, they're probably only been grown for human pleasure. And my fellow women photographers and I, we talk about the male gaze and the female gaze. I think I now look out through the plant gaze. I've dived into deep ecology. And things really started to shift when I moved to Norfolk in 1995 to a house that had 4 acres of land. It was a bit daunting, and it's surrounded by industrially farmed fields. I felt a really strong urge to rewire the land and return it to a more natural state, and change what was pasture to wildflower meadows, which is not a quick process, actually. And I planted a woodland of over 300 trees, and here they are 20 years ago, and here they are today. I feel like these trees are my friends or my relatives. I don't have children, and I've really loved seeing them mature. I became a passionate gardener, and I'm now involved with plants in their natural habitat. And they're no longer decoration for me now. I feel like I'm tending communities of living beings. And my photography moved to something called plant portraiture. It's a sort of more intimate studies of plants. You need to create a connection in portraiture, just like in painting, you're observing a character. It's the same in plant portraiture. And there's certainly a great diversity of character in the plant kingdom. I'm quite influenced by Goethe and what he calls the plant's gesture. It's the way they express their essential nature in their posture, in the way they sort of hold themselves. Some are sort of diminutive, like this fritillary, and some more outgoing, like this daisy. And I realize I'm anthropomorphizing them, but I think that these characteristics that we have in common can be a bit of a gateway for people to see plants as living beings and help overcome what's being called plant blindness. And maybe it opens a possibility of a richer relationship, and people might spend a few more seconds engaging with the plant and creating some sort of mindful space to draw them a bit closer. Because plants are sharing their stories through their shape and their color and their scent. They're communicating out into the world. I can't pick up the scent, but people who pick up these things have told me that images can just transmit a vibrational field of the plant, much in a way that the flower essence might. And there's now evidence people get better quickly, much more quickly if they're in a room overlooking nature and even looking at images of nature. And though it's pretty ubiquitous these days, I still think photography is a powerful communication medium. Susan Sontag called photography a pre-intellectual mode of encounter. So I became interested in the whole life of a plant, not just the flower. And I did some books called Bud to Seed, which was celebrating all stages of the life, not just the flower, because it's not all about the flower. And Goethe described each stage as either expansion or contraction. The bud is the contraction, the flower is the expansion, and then the seed head is the contraction. And he saw these as all essential rhythms of nature. He noted that plants are always becoming something else. It's all stages in the part of a process. And eventually, most seed heads are pushing outwards as they send their seeds on their way. And these are from a series which I called Release. I sort of began using plant gestures to illustrate universal concepts like release. And this letting go concept, it really fascinated me. I was beginning to release my own preconceptions about control, and there were seeds of new ideas being formed. And about this time, I started to get interested in seeds for growing vegetables, actually. And I came across the Heritage Seed Library. They have seeds of vegetables which aren't sold commercially. And they have fascinating names and stories. And I took up their challenge. They gave me a challenge to make portraits of their heirloom vegetables for a calendar. And I grew the plants so that I could show the different stages. I'd always bought vegetable seed from garden centres, as many do. They just seemed to be something mostly called F1 hybrids. I didn't know what these were. And I pretty much bought into the rhetoric that they were bred, to be bigger and better vegetable. But I learnt in 1964 that the EU wanted to regulate seeds, and they demanded that all seeds were registered on a national list. So if you wanted to sell a seed, it cost £100 to register, and many just weren't put onto it. But people realised that many old family and local varieties were being lost, and a seed saving movement was born to stop this loss of diversity and literally save seed from extinction. I just love the stories that are attached to the seeds, and the people who saved them and how they were passed on. There's no Latin names here. It's a joy, really, isn't it, to read the descriptions and the experience of the seed savers who grow them, and they keep the stock replenished. Seeds have always been saved by farmers, passing down through generations and traded by seed merchants until chemical farming came along. And now there are 4 mega corporations who control over 60% of the global seed trade. And these corporations have patented seeds that they've modified to be dependent on their chemicals. And so they now control the genes of plants, which are handed down through the generations. And the farmers are slaves to these corporations. They don't own the seeds, they just license them. And they're obliged to buy chemicals from their masters to ensure they get a decent crop. And the seeds are also slaves, exploited by the capitalist system. They're drenched in chemicals and even have their bodies invaded by genetic engineering. I found out why you can't save seed from F1 hybrids you buy from the garden centre. They put in a gene called a terminator gene, so the plant can't produce viable seeds, and farmers can't save them.
I'm just
These plants,
giving you 5 minutes.
thank you. These plants are totally controlled. They've lost their vitality and their connection to the web of life and their agency. They're broken-hearted seeds, and they reflect a broken-hearted people. It's all very far away from the healthy heritage varieties that are flourishing in the seed bank, grown by the seed guardians and then passed back to Heritage Seed Library to distribute. I mean, the vegetable plants can be quite beautiful, actually, as they mature to flower and seed. This is Ragged Jack, which I grow, and I've been growing for about 20 years. It has a beautiful flower. And this is Purple Podded Pea, which also has a lovely flower. So, and when it comes to seed saving, we have to decide which plant we're going to take the seed from. And this is something called roguing. The plants with the undesirable traits are rogued out. And so the seed remains true to type. And to bring back genetic diversity, we need to have a balance between the plants that have adapted to the conditions and the character of the variety. So you need knowledge of what they call identifiable traits of the variety. And so I'm really interested in this, of course, because it involves lots of close observation of the plant and its unique gesture, the colour and the shape, and of course the taste. I mean, plants like this beetroot, you have to sacrifice the crop for the seed because the beetroot becomes woody and edible when the seeds are formed. And this is the seeds of the beetroot growing in my garden. And then the lettuce, that the seeds, when it goes to seed, the leaves go bitter. So I, of course, selected the best of them to photograph, and I wasn't able to let them go to seed. This is the seed of the lettuce forming. The seed is called open pollinated seed, and it's produced by natural methods, and it can be saved and grown again and again. So it's what's called open source. It's owned by nobody and everybody, and it's really important for food security. And slowly the movements have grown, and there are lots of groups now like London Freedom Seed Bank and Seed Cooperative. They're all growing and saving open pollinated seeds, and the seed guardians are looking after the seeds, and they actually they take from quite a few different plants to keep the diversity, because even if they've done well in their gardens, they might not do well in another part of the country, so they take from a broader selection. But in a local seed saving group, you could just choose one that's done best in your situation and your particular soil and your type of gardening. You're really working in partnership and collaborating with the plants and giving the seeds their best chance. I mean, seed saving is pretty homespun activity, even on a large scale. I took these shots at Heritage Seed Library, and there's a lot of sieves involved, as well as blowing and washing. But hands are remaining in constant contact with the seed. And the simple pleasure of winnowing seed, which is done once it's dry, by rubbing it between your hands and watching the chaff blow away, can be wonderfully mindful. The experience of the seed and the seed saver is a visceral relationship. And the humans can be like a sort of midwife, helping bring new life into the world. I think this attracts women who haven't had children, like myself, to feel part of the nurturing of life. I have a girlfriend of mine who also doesn't have children, and she's given me seeds to plant and weave stories around. She sent me a story that she's written, inspired by a chapter in this wonderful book, Braiding Sweetgrass, which I urge you to read. The chapter's about beans, corn, and squash. There are already many stories embedded in the culture of Indigenous people about the three sisters, which is what they call them, and how they grow together, cooperating and helping each other. And she's sent me her story and the three sister seeds, because she says we shared sisterly qualities, which I find very, very touching, and I want to grow them and connect with them. And when I save the seed, of course, it will connect me more deeply to this friend. And I think whole communities can create local identity and heritage through stories, by food growing and seed sharing, and at the same time build resilience and food security. One merchant called Real Seed gives seed saving guidance when they sell their seeds, and they're encouraging people to form seed circles where everyone grows 1 or 2 plants to seed, and then they exchange them with each other, which I think is a brilliant initiative. There's been a massive seed surge actually during COVID. Suddenly seeds have sold like hotcakes. This is about the exchanging seeds. And this is a post that Real Seed put up on Facebook, because they're completely overwhelmed by orders. And most seed cooperatives have been in the same situation actually last spring and also this spring. They've had to close their websites and regulate customers. But this is good news. It seems the stories we've lived by are really breaking down, and we've become alienated from the ecosystem that we're part of, and people are yearning to feel connected. And I think seed planting gives fragments of meaning in the wasteland of materialistic culture. It connects us to nature and our food. We need more seed literacy, more ceremony and gratitude, and more an intimate relationship with plants. Then maybe we can see them as relatives like the indigenous people do. We can allow them to fulfill their purpose and co-create seed with them in collaboration rather than domination. Seeds can adapt. Oh, I missed about that bit. Sharing seeds online. This is a platform for sharing seeds online. Seeds can adapt to an uncertain future if they're grown. So they're responding to the variations in the seasons and the environment, that they can get resilience. There are seeds being stored in huge cold storage vaults and seed banks, but they are only grown from time to time. And there are restrictions on who has access. They cater really for genetic scientists who see them as a commodity, just a material to mix and match genes rather than living beings.
Carol, I probably need to stop you there just so that we can allow enough time to just...
I'm right at the very end, yes.
Go on, finish. It's good.
The plight of the seed, I think, is one of the most important environmental stories of our time. As seeds are strengthened, so are people. A seed holds the collective wisdom of years of evolution. Seed germination is a symbol of the soul's journey from darkness to light. And this is just a piece. So I've started to write poetry and to put with my images, and this is a more recent piece. That's the end. So I can stop my share, should I?
Yes, please. That's great. Thank you ever so much. That was really interesting. And yeah, I think there will be probably lots of questions in the chat. We have 1 minute left, so I'm going to steal that minute just to say that I think the naming of seeds, the naming of those heritage seeds that comes from the heart, lots of those names, seems very similar to me to a lot of field names which have also disappeared, which also told a story. And yeah, I think a field name says an awful lot about who inhabited the field, what was cared for, who belonged there. And I think seeds, those heritage names, particularly for seeds, they feel so different from the commercial names, don't they?
And the Latin names as well.
Yes, sure. I mean, you know, the nail system is really interesting, but as you say, it can be quite alienating for some. Brilliant. Thank you ever so much. Does anybody like to come in with a quick comment or a question for Carol? There's quite a lot of stuff in the chat that you can look at as well later.
Oh, I haven't looked.
Yeah, it'll be saved. So, so we are at 2 o'clock. So I think what I will just wrap up by saying that thank you to everybody who's been today and everyone who's contributed. It's been a wonderfully kind of wide-ranging, as usual, collection of voices, and yet lots of similarities running through the work. The video from this will be on the website probably by Monday. Ditto the chat. So if you want to access some of there's quite a few other book suggestions that have been thrown in. Thanks, Minu, for putting up the link to the Goethe work about seeds and gesture. And nothing else to say, but thank you very much. We'll see you next time. As usual, first Friday of the month, whenever that is, 1 o'clock. Okay, thank you, everybody.